Pack your box, Boomer. The 25-year-old manager laughed, the sound bouncing off the glass walls of the conference room. He spoke with the breezy arrogance of someone who had never balanced a ledger in a recession, wearing a bright blue suit and a smile that cost more than my first car. His name was Travis Albright, the new vice president of strategic revitalization, a title that meant nothing but cost six figures. I sat there, hands folded on the mahogany table I ordered in 1998, and just looked at him. I did not blink or cry. After 25 years in operations, you learn that panic is just poor logistics. Now back to Travis, who was currently tapping a stylus against a tablet that I had likely purchased. "Look, Gordon," he sighed, leaning back in a chair designed to support a spine he clearly did not have. "It is nothing personal, really. We are just pivoting. The company needs to be agile. We need to be mobile first. We need fresh blood to interface with the younger demographic. Your operational style is, well, it is vintage. And vintage is cool for denim, but not for logistics." He looked around the room for validation. The two interns, barely out of college, stared at their shoes. The human resources representative, a woman named Harriet Finch, whom I had helped through a messy divorce 3 years ago, would not meet my eyes. She was aggressively taking notes on a blank page. The silence stretched thin and brittle. Travis continued, clapping his hands. "We have prepared a severance package. 2 weeks of pay for every year served, capped at 6 months. We will need your badge, laptop, and keys by 5 in the afternoon. Oh, and Gordon, wipe your personal files from the drive. We do not want your cat photos cluttering the server." He chuckled, and the interns offered weak, nervous laughter. I stood up slowly, my knees popping in the quiet room. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the employee parking lot, the manicured lawn, and the cornerstone of the building itself. "Understood," I said. My voice was level, no tremolo, no rage. Travis looked disappointed. He wanted a scene. He wanted the weeping old man pleading for his pension. He wanted to feel powerful by denying mercy. My calm was robbing him of his climax. "Great," he said, standing up and checking his smartwatch. "Got a lunch with the branding consultants. Harriet will walk you out." I walked back to my desk, a quiet spot in a sea of open-concept chaos. I packed only the essentials into my cardboard box. A fern older than Travis, a 3-pound metal stapler, a framed photo of my late wife Clara, and my offline Rolodex filled with cell phone numbers for every city vendor and zoning inspector in the area. The office buzzed around me, people whispering about the old fossil finally getting the axe. I let the humiliation wash over me. It was the necessary fuel. When you work somewhere for a quarter of a century, you become like the furniture, and people do things in front of furniture they should not do. Harriet hovered by my cubicle wall, clutching a folder. "Gordon, I am so sorry," she whispered. "You know this was not my call. Travis has the ear of the board of directors. They want a younger image." "It is fine, Harriet," I said, dropping a stress ball into the cardboard box. "Really, it is time for a change. You are taking this so well," she said, sounding relieved. "Most people scream." "I am not most people," I said. I picked up my box and walked toward the elevators, passing the broken coffee machine I usually fixed and the server room cooling units whose maintenance contracts I had negotiated. I passed Travis' glass-walled office. He was laughing on the phone, feet up, and gave me a mock salute. "Enjoy retirement, old man," he called out. I did not stop or look back. The elevator ride down was silent. The lobby was cool and sterile. The security guard, Michael, looked confused. "Leaving early, Mr. Vance?" "Something like that, Michael," I said. "Take care of yourself." I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the heat. I walked to my 2018 Toyota Camry, placed the box in the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel. I did not start the car immediately. I just sat there staring at the building. It was a beautiful building, 4 stories of gleaming glass and steel. Prime location, great highway access. I remembered when it was built. I remembered the smell of the wet concrete. I remembered the arguments over the zoning permits. Travis thought he had just fired an operations manager. He thought he had just trimmed some fat from the payroll. He thought he was the captain of the ship now. He did not know that I was not just the crew. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had not called in years, but one that was saved in my favorites. "Garrett and Associates," a voice answered. "Hello." "Garrett," I said. "It is Gordon. Gordon, my God, I have not heard from you since the lease renewal in 2005. Is everything all right? How is the job? I looked up at the fourth floor where Travis was probably high-fiving the branding consultants. I am retired as of 10 minutes ago, Garrett, I said. I am sorry to hear that, the lawyer said, his voice dropping. Age discrimination suit? We can file by morning. No, I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips. No lawsuits. That is too slow. I want to talk about the land, Garrett. Specifically, the lease agreement for the headquarters. The lease? Garrett sounded confused. What about it? I want you to pull the file for Valerius Holdings LLC, I said. I want you to look at Clause 11B regarding structural modifications and code compliance. And then, Garrett, I want you to initiate Phase 1. There was a pause on the line, then the sound of papers rustling. Gordon, Garrett said, his voice changing from sympathetic to sharp. Are you sure? If we trigger that clause, it is going to be messy. I watched a pigeon land on the hood of my car. Travis wants a revolution, I whispered. He wants to shake things up. I think we should help him. I started the car. The air conditioning kicked in, blasting cool air into my face. Do it, I said, and I hung up. I drove past the entrance sign, a sleek, modern monolith that had cost the company $20,000 last year to rebrand. It used to be stone. Now it was brushed aluminum. It looked cheap. It looked like something that would dent if you looked at it wrong, just like the new management. As I merged onto the highway, my mind drifted back more than 2 decades. It was 2001. The dot-com bubble had just burst with the violence of a supernova. Companies were folding overnight. The stock market was bleeding out in the street. Our company, then a scrappy, mid-sized logistics firm founded by 2 brothers, Eugene and Howard Miller, was on the ropes. They were cash poor, panicked, and staring down the barrel of bankruptcy. They needed liquidity. They needed it yesterday. They were selling everything: trucks, patents, office furniture, and they were about to sell the land the headquarters sat on to a predatory developer who planned to bulldoze it for a strip mall. I was the office manager back then. I was young, sharp, and I had just inherited a significant but quiet sum of money from my grandmother, a woman who did not trust banks and buried gold bars in her crawl space. I saw the value in the land. It sat on a major fiber optic junction and had dedicated access to the interstate. It was a gold mine disguised as a dirt patch. I went to Eugene and Howard with a proposal, but I did not go as Gordon, the office manager. I went through a lawyer, hiding behind a shell company I named Valerius Holdings, named after a Roman consul I had read about in a history book. I offered to buy the land for cash, slightly above market value, and lease it back to them on a 99-year triple net lease. Eugene and Howard were so desperate, they did not even ask who was behind the corporation. They just saw the check. They signed the papers, high-fived each other, and saved the company. I saved the company. For 20 years, the company paid rent to Valerius Holdings. The checks went to a post office box, then to my lawyer, then to a trust. I never touched the money. I reinvested it. I bought more land, compounded the interest. To everyone in the office, I was just Gordon from operations who made good potato salad for the summer potlucks. To the county recorder, Valerius Holdings was a faceless entity that paid its property taxes early. Eugene and Howard retired 5 years ago. They sold their shares to a private equity firm. That firm installed a board of directors who cared more about quarterly projections than long-term stability. And that board hired Travis. Nobody from the new regime had bothered to read the original lease. Why would they? It was a legacy contract. It was on autopay. It was a line item in a spreadsheet that nobody questioned. It was a massive mistake. I pulled into my driveway. My house was modest, a brick rancher with a well-tended garden. I did not live like a secret commercial landlord. I lived like a man who enjoyed silence. I carried the box inside and set it on the kitchen table. The silence of the house usually comforted me. Today it felt charged, electric. I made myself a cup of Earl Grey tea. I did not use a tea bag. I used loose leaves. I waited for the kettle to whistle. The ritual centered me. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Harriet Finch. He is already moving into your office. He is measuring the walls for a vision board. I am so sorry, Gordon. I took a sip of tea, a vision board, of course. I walked into my home office, a room that looked more like a command center than a study. It had 2 monitors, a heavy shredder, and a filing cabinet that locked with a physical key. I unlocked the bottom drawer and pulled out a thick leather folder, the original lease. The paper was heavy, high-quality bond. It smelled like old toner and victory. I flipped through the pages, scanning the legalese that I had helped draft 2 decades ago. Clause 4, rent escalation, standard. Clause 8, maintenance responsibilities. Triple net meant they paid for everything. Clause 11b, structural integrity and alterations. Here it was, my weapon. The tenant shall not make any structural alterations, additions, or improvements to the premises, including but not limited to the removal of load-bearing walls, modification of electrical grids, or changes to the vent infrastructure, without the express written consent of the landlord. Failure to obtain such consent constitutes a material breach of this lease. Upon such breach, the landlord reserves the right to terminate the lease with 30 days of notice or demand immediate restoration of the premises to its original condition at the tenant's sole expense. I knew for a fact Travis was planning a remodel. He had been bragging about it for weeks. He wanted an open-concept creative hive. He wanted to knock down the walls between the engineering department and the sales floor to facilitate synergy. I logged onto my computer. I still had my access to the building security cameras on my phone. I had set up the system after all, and I knew the backdoor administrator login that never changed because the IT department was underfunded and overworked. I pulled up the feed for the 4th floor. There he was. Travis was standing in the middle of the engineering bay with a contractor. He was pointing at a wall, a load-bearing wall. I zoomed in. The contractor looked skeptical. He was shaking his head. Travis was waving his arms, doing that thing where he mimics an explosion with his hands to signify mind-blowing innovation. I could almost hear him saying to just get it done and not to be a blocker. I took a screenshot. Then I pulled up the county permit records. I searched for the address. Under active permits, there was nothing. Travis was not just arrogant. He was acting illegally. He was bypassing the city permitting process because permits took time, and Travis wanted his creative hive ready for the 3rd quarter investor showcase. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly. The tea was warm in my hands. The anger I had felt in the conference room was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. This was not about revenge anymore. This was about education. I was going to teach Travis a lesson about due diligence. I picked up the phone and called Garrett again. "Garrett, phase 1 is a go," I said, staring at the screen where Travis was now literally kicking the drywall to show how weak it was. "And Garrett, get the eviction papers drafted, but do not file them yet. I want to let him spend some of his budget first." "You are terrifying, you know that?" Garrett said. "I am just agile," I said. "I am pivoting." 2 days later, I was in my garden pruning the hydrangeas. It was a therapeutic kind of violence. Snip, dead weight gone. Snip, room for new growth. I had my tablet computer propped up on the patio table. I had accessed, using my legacy credentials, the company-wide stream link for the town hall meeting. On the screen, Travis was pacing back and forth on a stage that had been erected in the main atrium. He was wearing a headset microphone, looking like a technology presentation reject. Behind him, a massive projector screen displayed a slide that just said disruption in bold font. "We are not just a logistics company," Travis shouted, his voice cracking slightly. "We are a movement. We are a vibe." The old guard, he actually paused to make air quotes, built this company on spreadsheets and paper trails. They built silos. They built walls, literally. And what do we do with walls? He held the microphone out to the audience. The employees gathered in the atrium mumbled something incoherent. They looked tired. The lighting in the atrium was harsh, and I noticed the air conditioning was off, probably a cost-saving measure Travis implemented to optimize overhead. "We tear them down!" Travis screamed, answering his own question. The slide behind him changed. It was a digital rendering of the new office layout. It looked like a playground for adults, beanbag chairs, foosball tables, and a massive open space where the structural columns used to be. I stopped pruning. I leaned in, squinting at the screen. He was not just removing drywall. The rendering showed the removal of 2 primary support columns on the east wing, the wing that held the heavy server racks on the floor above. My stomach dropped, not out of fear for my job, which was gone, but out of fear for my building. If he cut those columns, the 2nd floor would sag. The server racks would slide. The structural integrity of the entire east face would be compromised. The building would not collapse immediately, but it would be uninhabitable within months. He was going to destroy a $40 million asset because he wanted a collaborative flow. I watched as he pointed to the rendering. Construction starts Monday, he said. We are doing a demolition day team building exercise. Everyone gets a sledgehammer. The crowd cheered weakly. Mandatory fun is the worst kind of torture. I picked up my phone. Garrett said as soon as he answered. Change of plans. We cannot wait for him to spend the budget. He is going to compromise the structural integrity on Monday. What? Garrett asked. How do you know? He is live streaming his intent to commit gross negligence, I said dryly. He is handing out sledgehammers to the accounting department. Garrett. He is going to have the intern from payroll taking swings at a load-bearing column. My goodness, Garrett breathed. Okay. Do you want to do an injunction? No, I said. An injunction is a slap on the wrist. He will fight it. He will spin it as legacy interference. I want to trigger the breach immediately, but I want it to hurt. I looked back at the screen. Travis was now doing a trust fall off the stage into the arms of the IT director. Prepare the notice to quit, I said. But first I am going to make a call to the city. If they are starting demolition on Monday, they need permits. I know for a fact the permit office has not seen an application for that address in 10 years. Gordon, Garrett warned. If you call the code inspector, they will shut the building down. The business will halt. They will lose millions in operational downtime. I looked at my hydrangeas. They looked beautiful, orderly, and well-maintained. They should have thought of that before they fired the person who maintained the permits, I said. Fair point, Garrett said. I will draft the letter. When do you want it served? Monday morning, I said. Right when the first sledgehammer hits the wall. I hung up. On the screen, Travis was now showing a slide of a sleeping pod. I closed the tablet cover. The screen went black. I went back to my pruning. The decision was made. It was not just about getting back at Travis anymore. It was about stewardship. I own that land. I own that steel and concrete. It was my responsibility to protect it from idiots. If protecting my property meant bringing down the company that rented it, well, that was just the cost of doing business. I spent the rest of the weekend preparing. I did not drink. I did not sleep much. I organized my files. I printed out the emails I had saved, the ones where I had warned the previous management about the structural limitations of the East Wing. I printed out the architectural blueprints I had in my safe. I was building a dossier, not for a lawsuit, but for an execution. Sunday night I sat on my porch. The air was thick with humidity. I could hear the distant hum of the highway. Somewhere down that road my building stood in the dark, waiting for the assault. I took a sip of iced tea. Hang in there, old girl. I whispered to the building I could not see. The cavalry is coming. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. Rain threatened, hanging low and heavy. It was perfect. I did not go to the office. Instead, I went to the county clerk office. The clerk office is a place where hope goes to die, buried under fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial carpet cleaner. But for me, it was a library of secrets. I walked in at 8:05 in the morning. The clerk, a woman named Mabel, who had been there since the administration of the 80s, looked up over her spectacles. Gordon, she squinted. I thought you were working corporate. Have not seen you down here since the zoning dispute of 12 years ago. I am freelance now, Mabel, I said, sliding a box of donuts across the counter. Maple bars, your favorite. Mabel eyes softened. Bribery in local government is not cash. It is pastries and politeness. What do you need, hon? I need to pull the jacket for 400 Innovation Drive, I said, and I need to see if any emergency variance requests were filed over the weekend. Mabel tapped on her keyboard. The sound was rhythmically reassuring. Clack, clack, enter. Nope, she said, popping the lid on the donut box. Last permit on file is for a signage change 3 months ago. Why? You hear construction? I heard rumors, I said. Loud ones. Well, if they are hammering, they are illegal, Mabel said, taking a bite of a maple bar. You want me to flag it for the inspector? Not yet, I said. I need a certified copy of the original deed and the easement agreement for the fiber lines. Mabel printed them out. The stamped certified copy clacked onto the paper with a sound of finality. I took the documents and sat on a wooden bench in the hallway. I reviewed them. Everything was in order. My corporation, Valerius Holdings, was the undisputed owner. The easement was strict. No interference with subterranean infrastructure. If Travis knocked down that east wing wall, he would not just risk the roof. He would likely sever the grounding cables for the main server stack, which ran through the pillar he called an eyesore. I checked the time. It was 9:30 in the morning. At the office, the demolition day party would be starting. I opened my phone and checked the security feed again. It was chaos. Travis had actually bought matching hard hats with the company logo. There were balloons. There was a disc jockey in the corner playing loud electronic music at 9 in the morning. The employees looked miserable, holding sledgehammers like they were foreign objects. Travis was shouting over the music. "Okay, team, we are breaking barriers. Smashing the status quo. Who wants the first swing?" A young guy from sales, Wesley, stepped up. He looked eager to impress. I switched applications on my phone. I opened my email. I had drafted a message to the City Code Enforcement Division. The subject line read, "Urgent unpermitted structural demolition, life safety hazard, 400 Innovation Drive." I attached the screenshot of Travis pointing at the load-bearing wall. I attached the certified deed showing I was the owner and had not granted consent. I attached the blueprint highlighting the gas line that ran 6 inches behind the drywall they were about to hit. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. This was not just a prank. This was bringing down the thunder. People would be sent home. Fines would be levied. The company's stock might take a hit. Then I saw Travis on the screen. He was taking a selfie with the sledgehammer. I hit send. I texted Garrett. "The package has been delivered. Serve the papers." I walked out of the clerk office into the drizzle. I felt light. I drove to a coffee shop across the street from the office building. It was a modern place with overpriced coffee, but it had a perfect view of the front entrance. I ordered a hot tea, sat by the window, and waited. At 10:15 in the morning, the first vehicle arrived. It was not the police. It was a white sedan with the city seal on the door. A man in a high-vis vest and a hard hat stepped out. He carried a clipboard like a weapon. Behind him, a red fire marshal vehicle pulled up. I sipped my tea. You see, the thing about moving fast and breaking things is that eventually the people whose job it is to keep things from breaking show up, and they do not care about your modern management theories. They care about the building code. I watched as the code inspector and the fire marshal walked up to the automatic doors. The security guard, Michael, stopped them. I could see him gesturing. The inspector showed his badge. Michael stepped aside quickly. They disappeared inside. I checked the camera feed on my phone. Travis was mid-swing. He was winding up to smash a hole in the drywall. The music was thumping. Suddenly, the double doors to the office suite flew open. The fire marshal marched in, looking like a thunderstorm wrapped in a uniform. He did not yell. He did not need to shout. He just walked over to the disc jockey booth and pulled the plug. The silence was deafening. Travis froze, sledgehammer in the air. He turned around, looking annoyed. "Hey, we are in the middle of a culture change here." The fire marshal walked up to him, looked at the sledgehammer, then at the wall, then at Travis. I could not hear the dialogue, but I saw the body language. The marshal pointed at the sledgehammer. "Put it down." Travis hesitated. The marshal stepped closer. Travis dropped the hammer. Then the code inspector stepped forward, unrolling a set of blueprints. He pointed at the wall. Travis was about to hit. He pointed at the ceiling. He pointed at the exit. Travis was waving his arms, doing that explosion gesture again. He was arguing. Bad move, Travis. Never argue with a man who can condemn your building with a red sticker. The inspector pulled out a pad of red paper. He started writing. I smiled, blowing the steam off my tea. Phase 1 was complete. The disruption had arrived. While the fire marshal was lecturing Travis in front of the quiet staff, I watched the fallout unfold online. An intern recorded the scene, and within 10 minutes, the video of the shutdown was posted on social media. I downloaded it and forwarded it to the board of directors anonymously, noting that Valerius Holdings, the property owner, had declared a material lease breach due to unauthorized construction. The board members panicked immediately when they realized their multi-million-dollar headquarters was in legal jeopardy. Across the street, a black sedan arrived at the curb. Alvin Dunlap, the chief executive officer of the corporation, stepped out and stared at the bright orange stopwork placard that was now taped to the front glass doors. Travis rushed out, waving his arms in panic, but Alvin simply pointed a furious finger at him, refusing to listen. I sent a text message directly to Alvin. "I heard you have a problem with the building. Meet me at the coffee shop across the street." Gordon Vance. Alvin walked into the coffee shop looking exhausted. He sat opposite me, sneering as he asked if I wanted my old job back with a consulting fee. I smiled, took a sip of tea, and explained that I was the sole proprietor of Valerius Holdings and had been their commercial landlord for 20 years. I watched his eyes widen as I explained that Travis had violated Clause 11B by performing unpermitted modifications. Alvin went pale. He tried to negotiate, offering to fire Travis, repair the wall, and pay a financial penalty. I told him this was not about money. I demanded a public apology to the staff, the restoration of the cut employee pensions, and a written admission of failure. Alvin stood up in anger, claiming his corporate lawyers would fight me, and stormed out. Over the next 48 hours, the corporate structure collapsed. The eviction filing became public, the stock dropped 4%, and Travis was fired. On Thursday, we stood before Judge Walters, a sharp woman with wire-rimmed glasses. Alvin lawyers tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee acting in bad faith. My lawyer Garrett presented the facts, the video of Travis, the blueprints showing the load-bearing columns, and the city stop-work order. Judge Walters was unimpressed by the corporate defense, noting that unpermitted demolition of structural columns was a serious hazard. She ruled that ignorance of the lease was no defense and granted the eviction, giving the tenant 7 days to vacate under state unlawful detainer laws. The following week was complete chaos as the company scrambled to move. Moving trucks lined the street, and employees struggled to relocate decades of physical files and expensive equipment. During the transition, Felix from the Information Technology Department called my personal phone. He was panicked, explaining that the executive team was forcing them to rip the servers out of the racks without proper shutdown procedures to meet the 7-day deadline. He was terrified that they would lose all the client data, which would bankrupt the business and leave the technology staff without jobs or references. He reminded me of the time he helped me fix a jammed office printer, and how I was the only manager who had ever treated him with respect. I felt a twinge of sympathy. I told him to log into the system tonight and back up all the critical databases to the secure cloud. I gave him the location of the encrypted backup security key I had hidden in the wall safe of my old office, and told him the combination was 1998, the year the company was founded. Felix was incredibly grateful. Thanks to his quick work in my backup system, the critical data was safely preserved before the server hardware was dismantled and thrown into the moving vans on Friday morning. The sheriff deputies arrived at 9 o'clock sharp to execute the eviction and lock the doors. Alvin Dunlap was the last person to exit the building. He was carrying a small cardboard box filled with legal papers and personal items, looking defeated and tired. His expensive suit was rumpled and his hair was messy. He stopped on the sidewalk when he saw me standing near the entrance. "You ruined us," he said, his voice hoarse with anger. "We have to move our entire operations to a small shared workspace in the suburbs. The brand is completely tarnished." I looked at him and said that the brand was tarnished the moment they decided to treat their employees as disposable assets to boost quarterly profits. I was simply protecting my property and enforcing the contract. He shook his head, got into his car, and drove away. The lead deputy handed me the new keys to the building. I unlocked the front door and walked through the quiet lobby. The terrible electronic music was gone, and the air smelled of dust instead of cheap cologne. I went up to the 4th floor and entered my old office, where the walls were still half-painted. Harriet Finch was there, retrieving a small jade plant she had left behind. When she saw the keys in my hand, she gasped and realized that I was the landlord. She laughed and said that everyone in the company was going to talk about this for years. I smiled and told her that protecting the structure is just good logistics. I walked to the window, looked down at the empty parking lot, and felt a deep sense of peace. I locked the doors, went home, and spent the evening feeding my cat.